The credit movement in this country started in 1904 and it had its own difficulties since the last several decades. The main problem regarding cooperative credit has been that it has been untimely and inadequate. In 1904, the Cooperative Societies Act was passed, which was later amended in 1914. Then there were certain committees appointed and they reported about the weaknesses of the credit movement in the country. In 1990, this subject of cooperation was transferred to the states, after which several states passed cooperative acts of their own. Thereafter, in 1929, the Royal Commission made certain inquiries about cooperation and the credit movement and made certain recommendations. Until 1950 or 1951, there was very little improvement in the field of cooperation. In 1951, the Reserve Bank of India appointed the Rural Credit Survey Committee, which brought out its report in 1954. That committee came to the conclusion that only 3% of the credit required by the agriculturists in the country was being met by the cooperatives, and it made certain suggestions. It suggested that there should be an integrated credit structure in the country and said that there should be share participation by the government in the cooperative societies. It suggested that the government should take shares in the cooperative societies so that the cooperative movement can get strength through government participation. The second recommendation made by the Rural Credit Survey Committee was that there should be linking of credit with marketing, processing, consumers, storage, and all other fields of activity so that credit will develop marketing, consumption, processing, etc. Yet another recommendation was that there should be a training program for the non-officials. The fourth recommendation and the salient one was that there should be a three-tier structure of credit. There should be cooperative societies at the lower level, then there should be district banks and then the apex banks, and that all that there should be interlinked. These recommendations were accepted by the Government of India. This report also recommended that in order to implement these suggestions, there should be a National Cooperative Development and Warehousing Board. The Government of India have accepted these suggestions in 1956. According to that act, there came into being a warehousing board which took care of the warehouses in the country, and also the National Development Board which took care of the development of the cooperatives. It was first thought that the two boards should be worked out under two different acts, but as both the subjects were administratively under one ministry at that time, namely the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, it was thought proper at that stage that the same act should administer the National Development Board and the Warehousing Corporation. Thereafter, a separate department of cooperation was created and attached to the Ministry of Community Development, now called the Ministry of Community Development, Panchayati Raj and Corporation, and it was decided by the government in 1960 that there should be two separate acts, one for Cooperative Development Board and the other for warehousing. In one of the papers submitted by the Minister of Food and Agriculture, on the basis of which the presidential order to create the development of corporation was passed, it was suggested that their two bodies should be administered separately, and this is why we have now come before Parliament with this National Cooperative Development Corporation Bill. The other bill relating to the Warehousing Corporation will come up through the Ministry of Food and Agriculture after the bill is passed. Therefore, sir, the present bill is only an amending bill and opportunity has been taken to have some minor amendments made in the bill. Firstly, the original act covered only agricultural produce, and agricultural produce had been defined in that act. And now, besides agricultural produce, any notified commodity is also being included. If government wants to include any commodity for which Parliament is competent to legislate, it can notify that commodity and apply the provisions of this measure to that commodity. In that case, we will not have to come to Parliament again and again. Any commodity which is in the concurrent list and for which Parliament can legislate can be notified by government for the application of these provisions. The second amendment is about the functional committees. In the present Act, there is no provision for functional committees. Now this corporation has to deal with credit processing, marketing, consumers and all these types of items in order to boost up the cooperative movement. We found that there was a lacuna and therefore we have suggested a provision to have functional committees. It is only an enabling provision, and after this bill becomes act, we will have functional committees regarding credit processing, consumers, etc. Then there was no power of delegation. Before I come to other points, I think it is necessary for me to deal with the substitute motion which has been moved by my honorable friend. Although it is in two parts, really it comes to this, that there is a suggestion that the coal target for the third 5-year plan may be revised upwards from the present 97 million tons. He said that this should be raised to 120 million tons and necessary transport arrangements should be made. If in our country our resources were such that we could find ourselves in an easy position, obviously we should always plan in a little easy manner our targets for coal production, transport, power and some other basic things. But we have to take a realistic view. If our overall resources are limited, financial and the like, we have to make optimum use of whatever those resources are, and we have to fit in various competing priorities within the overall resources. This is a matter which was discussed at great length when we were discussing some days ago our third 5-year plan. The third 5-year plan has now been approved by Parliament after a very lengthy and a detailed discussion in both houses of Parliament. Howsoever tempting this idea may appear to be, namely that we should plan for more transport, more coal, for more power and for a number of other things which are basic, they have to take their chance and they have to be fitted within the overall resources that are available. It is true that when the first exercise was made about the target for the third 5-year plan, the working group that was entrusted with this task came almost to the conclusion that the figure should be round about 120 million tons. But I would like to share with the Honorable House the processes that were gone through before the figure was arrived at. What should be the total requirement of steel to maintain a certain tempo of development in the course of the next 5 to 10 years? We had to start somewhere, so we started with steel. With so much more steel, what should be the additional quantity of coal that has to be raised not only to feed the steel plants but the additional transport that will be required for them? Therefore, I would differ respectively from the suggestion, namely that it means only an additional rupees 100 crores for increasing the production of coal from 97 million tons to 120 million tons. If it were really simple, we could perhaps somehow or other find an additional rupees 100 crores, although every crore of rupees having been already taken into account, it will be idle to talk of such a large additional as rupees 100 crores. But it is not rupees 100 crores that would be required but several hundreds of crores, because to utilize that coal, transport will have to be organized either by sea or by road or by rail. For the utilization of that coal, another heavy investment would be required in the form of consuming centers, in the form of other new industrial plants or power plants or the like. We must be too much obsessed by the present difficulties. By all means, let us try to solve them. Let us not form an exaggerated opinion of the overall requirements from the temporary shortage that we felt towards the end of the second plan period. Let us not think radically in revising upwards the figures which cannot, I would repeat, be revised singly. They are a part of an integrated whole. That means really an upward revision of the total size of the plan by another 20% or so, which I think is a suggestion which I am afraid the government cannot accept. Therefore, I would submit that upward revision by that large quantity cannot be accepted, although it is tempting. If I take a purely administrative view, it is easy for me to say that this is a good suggestion and we should accept it.